Please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before I hand the floor to the prosecution to put further questions to Mr. Sini Schenberg, we agree to the request by the prosecution for a further half a day to put questions to this witness, and the time will be allocated as follows. For the prosecution and the lead co-lawyers, it will be for 3 sessions, that is 2 sessions this morning and 1 session for tomorrow morning, and the remaining 1 session will be given to the defense. The floor is now given to the prosecution to continue putting further questions to Mr. Schenberg. You may proceed.
He said he got it once, Schenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're grateful for the extra time. Mr. Schenberg, I hope you can hear us. I think I heard your voice just... Thank you. If I can just continue on this topic we just discussed about the discipline of Khmer Rouge soldiers and people that you observed. We have on the case file a copy of a US cable, which is essentially a summary of an article that you wrote in September 1975. This is document E3/3355. E3/3355.
What was the date?
It's dated, the press summary itself is dated 18th of September 1975. I'm going to give the relevant ERNs and then I'll read a brief passage to you. In Khmer, this is found at 00740-897, and the pages following. In French, 00751-938, and in English, 00413-800. It's essentially a United States State Department's summary of an article that there is attributed to you, and as I said, it's dated 18th of September 1975. I'm only interested in a brief passage here. Quote, notes little info available on Khmer communist hierarchy, says KR soldiers, peasant boys, but officers educated could speak French. End of quote. This is one of the documents, of course, that we sent you, Mr. Schenberg. Is that an observation that you made in relation to Khmer Rouge officers apparently being more educated and being able to speak French?
Yes, it is, because I heard them speaking French when we were in the embassy.
Were there any other features of their behavior or uniform or their conduct that gave you the impression that they were educated people?
Well, I didn't have a lot of contact with them, but the contact I did have made me think of them as well-trained military officers. And the soldiers were not in the same category.
Thank you. Just on that, we're not going to have a lot of time to delve into the circumstances of your arrest, but one, and you've already given a brief summary, and the court has heard evidence from Mr. Rockhoff about this incident. But one particular aspect that I wish to explore with you further is when you were at the Riverside and you were held there for a period of time, did you observe officers and their behaviour there? Or were there any officers?
Yes. The officers were having lunch. And Death Pran, my assistant and brother, he kept going up to these officers and saying that we weren't Americans, that we were Canadians, and that we're here to record their victory. And then he was speaking in Khmer and told us most of this later. And then he also said to the officers, on the radio this morning, one of your generals said that the press could operate today and we will not harm them. And so these officers having their lunch finally gave in, because Pran is very persuasive, and Pran said, let me go to the so-and-so building where your headquarters, temporary headquarters is now, and let me go there with one of your officers and ask the question that how are reporters to be treated? They said yes. So they got an officer on his motorcycle, Pran on the back. They went to the building, and it was something like 20 minutes later or 30 minutes later, Pran comes back, and we're freed. But the whole time, we had guns pointed at us, and all three of us, Rockoff, myself, John Swain, were certain that this was it. And I mean, Pran is a very interesting subject, but probably not for this tribunal. But he saved our lives, and he was a great man. He died a few years ago. He believed in peace, and he suffered badly under the Khmer Rouge.
Thank you. I'm going to apologize to you for interrupting you. I know it's important.
I've gone off track, but in any case, it was something that will stay with me all my life. And so that is where I saw these men who finally listened to his plea and let us go.
Thank you. Just to explore very briefly aspects of that event, as I said, we don't have a lot of time to explore it extensively. Only a couple of aspects are of interest for present purposes. In your diary, you provide a detailed description of this. It starts on page 68. There is one particular, again, one aspect of the story. This is page 68, English ERN 8276, where you describe the conversation between Dithpran and the soldiers that had captured you. Quote, "The insurgents had told him to take off. We don't want you," they said. "We only want the big ones." But Pran knew we would be lost without him, so he talked his way onto the carrier. It was a supreme act of courage and loyalty, and it saved our lives. Those words, "We don't want you, we want only the big ones." How did you hear those words? Were they conveyed to you by Dithpran, or was it otherwise?
They were conveyed to me by Pran. And he, and I can't think of, he told me at the time the word, the Khmer word for the big boys, but I can't remember it now. And I watched it. Pran kept arguing with them, and it was an armored personnel carrier they were driving. And I didn't know what he was arguing with them for, because they were holding guns to our heads, and I thought, my God, if he doesn't stop, bothering them, we're going to get killed. So eventually he got on with us, and I asked him inside that armored personnel carrier. I said, why did you do that? And he said, "I knew that without me, you were going to get killed."
Thank you.
And that's all.
Thank you. Did you ask him, or was it at any point explained what these words, "the big ones," meant?
Well, the big ones are, they probably thought we were all Americans, their enemy.
Thank you. Moving on to another aspect of the event, where you describe two Cambodian men being pushed inside the carrier in which you were detained. It's on the same page, and you say they are dressed in civilian clothes, but it soon becomes clear they are military men. One of them, a large fat man with a mustache in a t-shirt and Levi's, reached behind me and tries to shove his wallet in my back pocket. He explains in French that he is an officer and must hide his identity. Now, just because it's also a description of the same event, can we take a look at page 64 of the Killing Fields book? And this is at English ERN 0086259A. So it's your page 64, Mr. Schamberg.
Yeah. Read it, yeah.
Oh, I do apologize. This is actually at page 62, not 64. 62 for this passage. You say the following, quote, "They stopped once to pick up two men, both in civilian clothes, one of whom we knew as the number 2 in command of the small Khmer Navy. The Khmer Rouge clearly knew who they were, and I thought to myself, these men are going to be executed." Can I ask you, is that an accurate account of your knowledge at the time, that one of the individuals was a deputy commander of the Navy of the Khmer Republic?
Yes, I didn't know it right away. I knew it only after we were released, and those two men were still under guard. They were not released, and I remember the whole thing vividly. he tried to give me his wallet, and I said in French, my very poor French, that I'm in the same boat that he is. And so giving it to me isn't going to help. And we ended up stuffing it under a sandbag that was on the floor of the armored personnel carrier. And when we were released, they were sitting outside this, on the sidewalk, guarded by soldiers. And I knew, we all knew, that we couldn't do anything for them. As I walked away, I thought, yeah. And that's what a lot of people take from wars. I'll never forget that. And we didn't do anything for them. And we got out.
Thank you.
And it probably has nothing to do with this, with your question, but it was a powerful day.
I'm sure it was, Mr. Schamberg. Do you recall by any chance the name of this individual, the Deputy Commander of the Khmer Navy, and do you know anything as to what happened to him afterwards?
I have no information of my own. And all I could do would be to guess.
And that's fine. We'll stop there. We won't ask you to guess. I'm going to move on now to the events that essentially followed your release. But before I do that, by way of context, I want to ask you about a particular passage of your book where you describe Lon Nol and his plans to flee Phnom Penh. This will be relevant for the subsequent questions I'm going to ask you. It's at page 22 of the diary, and this is ERN 008982330. So page 22 of the diary. Very short passage. You say the following, quote, and I should say it's dated the 5th of March, this entry. Quote, rumours have crept up again that Lon Nol may soon go into exile. He is one of the 7, quote, traitors, end of quote, whom the insurgents have marked for execution. Can I ask you first what you knew about these 7 traders, and what was the source of that information that they'd been marked for execution?
Well, the Khmer Rouge occasionally issued statements, and they had called them the 7 traders, and they were to be killed, and they kept repeating that, and not all of them were killed because Lon Nol indeed did go and left the country with his family and $1 million that the American government gave him, and he was living in Hawaii and died a few years later. But that's what that is all about.
Thank you. If I could read to you a transcript of a broadcast and see whether that corresponds with the description you just gave us. This is document E3/117, It's a transcription of a broadcast that is attributed to a voice of NUFC, clandestine, dated the 26th of February 1975. It's one of the documents that we sent you, Mr. Schamberg, in preparation for the hearing. I'm going to give the ERNs first and then read two excerpts. Khmer is at 00242-308. French is at 00281-432. And English is at 00166-772. Mr. President, with your permission, we can also display that on the screen for the public because we have it in the Khmer language. I will read it for you, Mr. Schamberg.
President, yes, you may do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the AV unit could assist us with displaying the Khmer version. Mr. Schamberg, it reads as follows. Title: Khieu Samphan chairs NUFC Congress session, communique issued. Voice of NUFC, in brackets, clandestine, in Cambodian, to Cambodia, 11:30 GMT, 26 February 1975. I'm going to read two extracts, both on the same page. First, quote, on 24 and 25 February 1975, the Great National Congress held its second session in an area of the liberated zone under the chairmanship of Mr. Khieu Samphan, RGNUC Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of National Defence, and CPN-LAF Commander-in-Chief. Then further down, numbered paragraph 1, quote, concerning the 7 traitors in Phnom Penh, the National Congress has decided as follows. Traitors Lon Nol, Serik Matak, Sonyok Tan, Cheng Hang, In Tam, Long Bore, and Sustena Fernandez are the chieftains of the traitors and ringleaders of the treacherous anti-national coup d'etat which overthrew the independence, peace and neutrality of Cambodia. Then skipping one sentence, quote, on behalf of the NUFC, RGNUC and CPN-LAF, the National Congress declares it absolutely necessary to kill these 7 traitors for their treason against the nation and their fascist, corrupt, criminal acts unprecedented in Cambodian history. Can I ask you first, are these the 7 traitors that you mentioned just a moment ago?
Yes.
And is this a broadcast you heard at the time, or is it consistent with broadcasts you heard at the time?
I myself never personally heard the broadcast, but we saw these reports with those quotations more than once.
Was the apparently intended fate of these 7 traitors, or this decision, was that something that you knew in the months or weeks leading up to the 17th of April?
Yes, yes, and there was a lot of talk about it.
Thank you. Now, as I said, we're going to move to the events that followed your arrest and particularly the treatment that you describe in your diary of certain officials of the Khmer Republic regime. First, if I can look at this is at pages 66 to 67 of your diary, ERN 00898274225. There is a broadcast that you describe. And it is, you describe essentially the interruption of the radio broadcast by a communist spokesman. And you say the following: the broadcast was interrupted by a communist spokesman who said abruptly, quote, "We did not come here to talk." Later, insurgent broadcasts said, "We enter Phnom Penh not for negotiation, but as conquerors. We have completely defeated the clique of the traitor Lon Nol. We therefore call on all commanders of the traitor units to lay down arms and surrender. Any soldier who refuses shall be severely punished." And then the next broadcast you describe as follows, quote, "Another message, broadcast several times, invited, quote, all ministers and generals who have not run away to come and meet with us immediately at the Ministry of Information to help formulate measures to restore order." End of quote. Can I ask you first, that broadcast in relation to all ministers and generals being invited to go to the Ministry of Information, is that something you heard yourself, or is it something you heard from other people?
I got that from a man who I hired to listen to the radio that day while I was out in the streets. This was a day when they came into the city, took the city. And he was a teacher at the university, and he took this quote down, and in fact it's one of the last things he did, because he came back to our hotel, and when we got back to the hotel and cleared out, and he had his family in the car, but he was carrying these notes and wanted me to have them. And he was driving the car, and he passed it through the window, and I knew that was a family that wasn't really going to make it.
Okay. I'm going to now move on to your description of what happened, what you witnessed at the Ministry of Information. This is at pages 69 and 70 of the diary, and it continues on to 71 as well. The ERN in English is 008982777, and the following 2 pages. You say the following on page 69, quote, "We head for the Information Ministry because of the earlier broadcasts asking high officials of the old regime to report there. When we arrive, about 50 prisoners are standing outside the building, which seems to be the insurgents' temporary headquarters. Among the prisoners are Brigadier General Lon Non, younger brother of Marshal Lon Nol, Brigadier General Chim Chuan, who was close to the Marshal. Other generals and cabinet ministers are also there, very uneasy, but trying to appear calm. Now, can I ask you first, what was it that... I'll start with a different question. Were you able to personally recognize these generals and cabinet ministers? Were these people that you knew previously as people holding these positions in the Khmer Republic regime?
Only a few of them did I actually, have anything to, any talks with or so forth. But they were clearly frightened, and I think most of them knew they were going to be killed. And there were even some women brought who were the people in the local Red Cross, the Cambodian branch of the Red Cross. And I don't know who got killed, but I don't know if everybody got killed, but I know that Lon Non, they announced they had killed, and Long Barrett, who was the prime minister, he arrived, and he had stayed in the country, and a lot of people had suggested he leave with his family, and he didn't. He said he couldn't, and he was killed. And I spoke with him at that building.
And we'll come to that conversation in a moment. You describe the rest of the scene, and I'll read the passages so everybody is aware of what is contained in the diary. On this will be page 70 in your version, Mr. Schamberg. Quote, "After a few minutes, a man with a bullhorn lines up the prisoners into three groups: military, government officials, and civilians. We newsmen are also lined up to one side. An officer, he seemed important and was probably a leading general, though his black pajama uniform bore no markings, and he declined to give his name, stepped forward and made an extremely conciliatory speech to the prisoners. He said that there were only 7 traitors, that other officials would be dealt with equitably, and he asked for their cooperation." You then actually spoke to this military leader, according to the diary. Can I ask you first, how many soldiers did you see securing these three groups and dividing them up, as you just described in that diary I read?
There were about 10 to 15 of troops, all heavily armed. And they kept circling these groups, crouching down and circling.
Thank you. For the avoidance of doubt, were these Khmer Rouge troops, and was this a Khmer Rouge commander?
Yes.
Thank you. You then describe a conversation this military leader had with journalists, and you say the following, quote, "As the conversation continues, Lon Non slips forward and quietly asks a French newsman to ask the insurgent leader if the prisoners here today or other Cambodian officials can leave the country if they wish to. A few moments later, the newsman gets a chance to ask the question. The military leader laughs softly. Quote, "It will depend on the government," he says. "They will make the regulations." He says he is only a military leader, adding that some of the top political and governmental leaders are not far from the city, but that they had let the military enter first to organize things. Is that an accurate summary of what happened? The this statement that was given by the military leader that decisions will be made by the government.
Yes, that is accurate. Once I got out of sight of that building, I scribbled it all down.
Thank you. The next event that happens is the arrival of Long Beret. And you describe it in the following terms. Quote, "While we talk, Long Beret arrives. His wife has driven him up in their Mercedes. The first thing he does is walk over to one of the ranking insurgent officers and grasp his hand for a long time, wordlessly. He was dressed in an aqua polo shirt and tan trousers, and he looked terrible. His eyes were puffed into slits. Perhaps he has been crying. He and Sirak Matak are the only two of the 7 traitors marked for execution who have not fled the country. He had been articulate on the telephone last night. Now he is having difficulty speaking. I tried to ask him some questions, but he can only mumble yes, no, and thank you. So conversation is impossible." Can you describe for us what else happened once he arrived and greeted the Khmer Rouge officer and you attempted to have a conversation with him? What happened to him next?
I can't say. They later announced that they had executed him, but it was at that time when, after I had spoken to him and told him how brave I thought he was, and I began to feel nervous. Let's not get arrested again, and went through my head. So we left and went back to the hotel, grabbed some clothes and some food we had saved, canned food.
Thank you.
To the French embassy.
And we'll come to the French embassy as well. You say at the end of that passage where you describe these events on page 71, quote, "As we leave the information ministry, the prisoners are being taken inside the building. It is last we saw of them." Is that the same group of 50 people now, and does it now include Long Beret?
Yes.
Were you able to observe what happened to his wife who had driven him to this location?
A few days later, she drove up to the gate of the French embassy, and she asked to see a United Nations man who was inside the enemy, inside the compound, and he came to the door, to the gate, and she asked for asylum, and that the French had been told by the Khmer Rouge before this that they could take no high-grade people and no important people, and if they did, others would die. And Jean d'Irac, the highest diplomat in the embassy at that time, told us all about this. In any case, the UN officer came back from that conversation and was really broken because he knew the Borés and he had to tell her that he couldn't help her. And she drove off. I honestly don't know what happened to her.
Thank you. Now, before we leave these events at the Ministry of Information, I wish to play you a short video clip, which is also on the case file. It's from a documentary called Pol Pot, The Killing Embrace. Mr. President, the document number is E3/2355R, and the ERNs are V001724454. It's only a 40-second video segment, and it has been already played in court. With your permission, Mr. President, I'd like to first play it in full, the 40 seconds, and then we can look at a particular specific images.
The President, you may proceed.
Now, Mr. Schamberg, it is a documentary, so it has a voiceover. I'm going to ask you to ignore the voiceover. It's not relevant for our purposes. What is relevant is your evidence and the images that are shown. So we will play the video first and see whether it contains any images that you recognize. If the AV unit can play it now.
In silence. The population has long been isolated and knows nothing of this strange army of children with blank, expressionless faces. But are they not Khmer too? Surely they will not harm their own people. Similarly bewildered, the guerrillas are illiterate peasants, most of whom have never seen city streets or cars or modern appliances. But they have been indoctrinated to see city dwellers as parasites who've drained the wealth from the countryside, people who had failed the revolution. First orders to round up and execute all those who were linked to the Lon Nol establishment. Moments after this photograph is taken, this group of MPs and bureaucrats are led to a nearby tennis court and massacred. And inside.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Mr. Schamberg, if you were able to see that, can I first check, were you able to see that, those images clearly?
Yes.
There was, in the final seconds of that video, there was a panned shot from right to left, which showed a number of people standing. Is that a location that you can identify?
No, not really.
I'm going to just show it to you on the screen and see if it does refresh your memory. If it doesn't, we will move on quickly. If I can ask the AV unit to just play from the video again from second 36 to the end of the video. See if that, so that we can just all see that again.
The President, AV booth, please play the video clip as per the request by the prosecutor.
After this photograph is taken, this group of MPs and bureaucrats are led to a nearby tennis court and massacred.
That was a little bit later than we wished, but does it in any way refresh your memory? Is it a gathering event you saw?
I myself didn't see such an event, but there really is only one place to play tennis in Phnom Penh, and that is I'm trying to think of the name of the club. But foreigners and well-to-do Cambodians would go there to have meals and to, use the pool and so forth.
Thank you.
So, but I can't say that this is exactly where they were because I can't be sure about it, and I don't really know about. There may have been many massacres in the early days and in later days, but I don't know about this one, so I think I should not answer.
And that's helpful. Thank you. Now, while we're dealing with the fate of the senior officials of the Khmer Republic regime, I'd like to fast forward in time to the 19th of April, an entry in your diary, which is at page 82. And you say the following. So at this stage you are in the French embassy, of course, and you describe what you saw and heard. Quote, at about 4:30 p.m., a loudspeaker truck passes the embassy 2 or 3 times, blaring the message, there are still traitors and super traitors in the city, we must look for them. We think it's ominous that they're doing this in front of the embassy. And I'll stop there. I'll move on to page 85. And read another passage which relates to the 20th of April. You say the following, quote, yet the Khmer Rouge do come for certain persons today, the high officials who have been hiding here. At 2:30 p.m, in a dismal drizzle, a squad of heavily armed soldiers pulls up to the gate in a jeep and a sanitation truck. There is some talk with Dirac at the gate, and then he goes inside. Within minutes, the ones they want start coming out. There are a dozen, including some women and children. As Sirik Matak emerged from the embassy, he walked erect to the gate. Frenchmen standing near him said the former Prime Minister told the Khmer Rouge as they led him away, I am not afraid, I am ready to account for my actions. All the prisoners, in fact, left the embassy in a reasonably dignified manner, except for Hong Bon-ho, the National Assembly President. And then, moving on to the next paragraph, the prisoners are put in the open back of the sanitation truck. For several minutes, they just sit huddled there in the rain. Then, a few minutes past 3 p.m, the truck and the jeep slowly pull away from the embassy like a funeral cortege. Were these events that you personally observed, the surrender of Sirik Matak and Hong Bon-ho as well as other people?
Right. I witnessed it, yes. It was pretty hard to watch.
You describe them as the ones they want. Can you tell us why you use those words?
The ones they want?
Yes, you describe these people as the ones they, as in the Khmer Rouge, want.
Well, it just comes from watching what took place. The Khmer Rouge come and say, you have people inside, and Dirac goes in and brings them out. And so that was, I think that's where that sentence came from. Those are the ones that they told Dirac they wanted. Dirac talked about that night. Later, that at night came into our building where we were staying, and I mean, there's the press and a few other people, and told about how all Cambodians without foreign papers must leave the embassy. Dirac himself had been a prisoner in World War II. He was a very good man, and he said, if and when we do such things, he talks about having to go to these people and tell them they have to leave. And he says, and when we do such things, we are no longer human beings.
Thank you. If I can now look at a document that we sent you a copy of, it's a telegram from the French embassy. It relates to these events. This is document number D199/26.2.199. It's a French embassy telegram dated 18 April 1975. It's a one-page document. Mr. President, with your permission, I will read from the telegram and see if the document can assist us.
The President, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Schamberg, as I said, it's dated the 18th of April 1975. It's authored by Dirac, signed by him, and it reads as follows. Subject: political asylum. I am referring to my telegrams number 586, 587 and 594. Following ultimatum from City Committee, I am compelled, in order to ensure the security of our compatriots, to include in the list of persons present at the embassy, quote, number 1, Prince Sirik Matak and 2 of his officers, number 2, Princess Mom Manivong of Lao origin, 3rd wife of Prince Sihanouk, her daughter, her son-in-law and her grandchildren, number 3, Mr. Ung Bon Ho, President of National Assembly, and number 4, Mr. Luong Nao, Minister for Health. Barring express and immediate order from the department requesting me to grant political asylum, I will be compelled to turn these names in within 24 hours. Mr. Schamberg, do you recognize any of these names apart from the 2 individuals you've already mentioned?
Well, I know some of the family people's names, but I've never met them. And my eyes really were on Sirik Matak. And because Sirik Matak had a few days earlier, or maybe a day earlier, he had sent a message to, I forget, it was the president or Kissinger, or I'm not sure which, or both, saying that you are abandoning us, and you said you would help us, and you did not, and so forth and so on. And he said he was staying in the country, and he was going to face his fate.
Thank you.
And when he came out of the compound, the building, he stood very tall. That's unusual for Cambodians. And he was stiff and straight and determined to keep a straight face.
Thank you. In the telegram, there is a reference to an ultimatum from a city committee. Can you help us with what that may relate to. You also mention a committee in your diary. Do you know anything about this body?
No. No, I really don't.
I'm going to show you, with the President's permission, a photograph and see if you recognize individuals in that. Mr. President, this is E190.1.307. It's a Newsweek magazine article dated the 19th of May 1975. It is not authored by Mr. Schamberg, but it includes references or summaries of his descriptions of the events. With your permission, I'll show a photograph from that article to the witness.
The President, please proceed.
Thank you. The photograph is really only relatively clear in the English version, and that is at Khmer ERN, English ERN 00445261. And I'm going to ask my assistant to display that on the screen for us, with your permission, Mr. President. Can I ask whether you have a copy before you, Mr. Schamberg?
Right. Yes.
If you can just give us a moment to locate it here and display it for the judges and everybody in the courtroom.
This is
Yeah. What? Yeah. It's a famous picture. But I never met the man.
Okay, we have that image now ready to display. If the AV unit could assist us to show it on the screens for everybody in the courtroom. The caption says, "No sanctuary. Hong Buon Ho is ousted by the French." Can I ask you first whether you recognize that individual? Is that Hong Buon Ho, as far as you recall?
I've seen that picture. I did not see the event. Friends of mine who had met him said that's who it was. And then there was a story to go with it that he had a bunch of money in a suitcase, etc., etc. But I never saw this happen, and it's just not a piece of the events that I paid attention to.
Thank you. We'll move on from that particular photograph. Dealing with these events, again, removal of senior Khmer Republic officials from the embassy, you provide further descriptions at pages 95, 96 and 97, again, in your diary. English ERN is 00898303 and the following pages. You're describing here a conversation you had on the 23rd of April with a Khmer-speaking French businessman who had attended some of the negotiations with the Khmer Rouge, or between the Khmer Rouge and the embassy officials. And these are some of the things that he reported to you. Quote, "The Khmer Rouge say they are still cleaning out military people from the old regime who have gone into hiding in the city which is why this zone is still under military and not political control. A little bit further down on the same page, you say, quote, he says, we have lost a week toward our evacuation because of the time it took to extract the big fish like Sirak Matak from the embassy. And a little bit again further down, 3 paragraphs down, quote, he says the Khmer Rouge refer to the people still hiding in the city as, quote, wild rats. The Khmer Rouge are much less suspicious of the embassy, he says, now that those hiding in the embassy have been turned over. Can you confirm for us that that was the information you received that from this man, from the discussions he took part in, that searches had continued for Khmer Republic officials?
Yes, that's exactly what he told me.
And there's another quote, or rather another passage on the next page. Quote, the Frenchman says that when the large main group of Cambodians left the embassy 2 days ago, they were taken to the municipal stadium where, quote, the important people were weeded out and taken away in trucks, and the others were then allowed to go up the road. He has the impression, which we all share, that the Khmer Rouge had a very good network of informers and agents in the city long before their victory. Do you recall whether that description he gave about the weeding out of important people from the trucks that had left the embassy, do you recall if that's something that he had been told or heard in the meetings?
I can't vouch for that because I really don't know if that actually happened. And a lot of things, probably did happen in those early days, but I didn't know anything about that. And just as let's say a guiding event, Tron and other Cambodian stringers, photographers and so forth, left the embassy a day before the Sirak Matak scene. And they just wanted to get out alone, and they didn't want to be in a big group. And that was Pran's, his sort of sensory organs being right again. I don't know how it relates to that, to what the businessman told me.
Thank you. With respect to the departure of the other Cambodian nationals from the compound, while we're discussing that, I'll just read to you another brief passage from the book, from the diary, at pages 83 to 84, English ERN 00898291291. This is an April 20 entry, so it occurs a little earlier in time. And the reason I'm reading it here is it provides some context to the departure of the Cambodians from the embassy. And you've touched on this a little bit. Quote, at about 7:30 a.m., there is bad news. Members of the embassy staff start moving around the compound, telling Cambodians without French papers that they must leave and join the trek into the countryside. We'd like to help you, but there is no way, one Frenchman said to them. We can't take you to France. If you stay here, there could be trouble. 2 paragraphs down, you say the following. A little later, we learned that the French advice to the Cambodians was the result of new directives from the Khmer Rouge. In the latest meetings, they have told the consul, Iraq, that they no longer consider this an embassy, but merely a regroupment zone for foreigners, which ruled out the possibility of asylum and made the Cambodians' departure essential. Can you assist us with these developments with respect to the embassy being deemed a mere recruitment zone? What were you told about that by Iraq or others who had communicated with the Khmer Rouge?
I think that the paragraphs you just read were what we were told about it. Because Iraq obviously felt terrible about it, but he had no choice. And so his government didn't allow him to give asylum, and the Khmer Rouge wouldn't recognize him as having the right to do that also.
And from what you were able to observe, with the exception of those that were able to or that had foreign passports, did all Cambodians leave the embassy in the following days?
Not exactly all, but almost all. Some of them hung around and thought that they might be able to hitch a ride on the convoy, and they did, with the help of Francois Bizot, an archaeologist who had a big heart, and we loaded up the first convoy in the dark, early morning. And so people couldn't tell colors of skin and so forth and so on. And he helped people climb over the sides of the truck instead of coming up the back. And I don't know how many, but he was another hero. And there were women and children, but I didn't know them all. There wasn't a lot of them, as far as I could tell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move on to a new topic. Is this a good time to break?
The President, thank you. The time is now appropriate for adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn for lunch, and we will resume at 1. And this afternoon, the Chamber will hear the testimony of an expert, TC E12. The expert will be questioned first by the lead co-lawyer for the civil parties before other parties. As for the testimony of Mr. Sidney Gilbert is adjourned now, and his testimony will resume tomorrow at 8:30. Mr. Gilbert, now your testimony is adjourned. However, we will resume hearing your testimony tomorrow. Therefore, the Chamber would like to invite you once again to testify tomorrow by a video conference. We will start at 8:30 in the morning, Cambodia time. Mr. Gilbert, is that clear for you?
Yes, Your Honor, it's clear. I'll be there at 8:30.
The President, thank you, Mr. Schanberg. The security guards are now instructed to bring Mr. Kyu Sampon to the holding cell downstairs, and have him return to this courtroom before 1:30 this afternoon.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ